Hey, what's up? It's 7:40 a.m. Welcome to Slay to Z, a tribute to the entire song catalog of one of the greatest bands of all time, Slayer, where every episode we aim to pick, slice, and dissect all things, say it with me now, Slayer. Hey man, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard the legend of Elizabeth Bathory? If you have, well, let me follow up with this question. How many songs, specifically by metal or hard rock artists, do you think have been written about or inspired by the Countess? How about dozens, if not hundreds? Everybody from Candlemass to Behemoth, Cradle of Filth to Susie and the Banshees have tackled this topic. Hell, black metal architects Bathory named their band after her as well as writing a song about her. Though it should be noted that the song Woman of Dark Desires did not actually appear until Bathory's third album Under the Sign of the Black Mark, which therefore kept them from achieving that wonderful trifecta akin to the song Black Sabbath from the album Black Sabbath by the band Black Sabbath. Bathory almost stuck the landing. But I digress. This is, after all, a Slayer podcast, right? So if writing a song inspired by Countess Bathory was practically a rite of passage for metal bands on the extreme ends of the genre in the 1980s, why then did it take Slayer until 2009 to try their hand at penning a track exploring the horrors of Bathory on their 11th album, World Painted Blood? Who the hell knows? Beauty Through Order is the song, and that's what we're here today to explore. Beauty Through Order is indeed the fourth track on World Painted Blood, with music written by Jeff Hanneman and lyrics by both Hanneman and Tom Araya. How will Slayer's swing at the story play out in the overall song ranking within the context of the entire catalog? Stick around to find out. So Beauty Through Order is representative of a musical and compositional evolution of sorts for Slayer. While it's not without its vast moments, much of the song, and especially the first half, is centered around a moody and dark feel. The droning, mid-tempo intro riff continues on into the first verse before the chorus riff is introduced at roughly the same tempo. Now, I feel like there's a really masterful tension build in the structure of the song, especially given the overall tone and style of riffing. The gradual build-up from verse into chorus, and then the kind of partial dissolution of that built-up tension as the guitars return to that droning opening verse riff. I'm going to probably repeat this several times, but this is absolutely some of the best songcraft in the band's catalog. Now, after the second chorus, there's a choppy bridge riff, which, with help from Lombardo's kind of insistent snare work, ratchets up the pressure further. And from here, most seasoned Slayer fans can likely feel that anticipation of the kind of the big pop before unleashing the extra speedy solo section. Well, that feeling is rewarded, as that is exactly where the song takes us next. So Kerry King takes the first lead, which is pretty recognizable as Kerry's playing, in my opinion. I think it's a pretty damn solid Slayer lead, if it is a little on the brief side. The best part is how the outro of the lead follows the transition of the riff into the kind of breakdown section of the song before it kind of digresses into that stereotypical Slayer wailing and whammy dives. It's a cool use of harmony by King to aid in the movement of the song, and I think it's really well done on his part. The breakdown or interlude of the song brings the tempo down a bit, but not quite to the original verse and chorus tempo. Again, it's a clever arrangement trick because the overall tension of the song is building even if it's not accelerating in a straight line. Kind of a 3 steps forward and 2 steps back kind of feeling. The way the breakdown riff develops over several bars, to me, is very reminiscent of the breakdown in Ghost of War off of South of Heaven. It's a relatively sparse riff that almost has like this call and response quality, and Hanneman and King have used this in many songs over the years to great effect as far as I'm concerned. I love it when they do this stuff. And it almost certainly has its roots in the influence of Judas Priest on the band, because it's definitely a technique that they use quite a bit themselves. And It's not unusual, I guess, in a lot of dual guitar metal bands. So I mentioned in the Americon episode that I'm not really a huge fan of the guitar sound on World Painted Blood, and this absolutely holds true on Beauty Through Order, where the gain is noticeably dialed back from previous Slayer recordings. The guitars generally sound a bit anemic to my ears, which, as both a lover of metal guitar and a half-assed novice metal guitarist myself, it's kind of a bum out. That part of me wants to hear these great riffs played through a Marshall JCM 800 with the gain dimed at 10 with a tube screamer thrown in for good measure. Or perhaps better yet, like the power and presence of a Mesa Boogie rectifier, or modern punch and clarity of a PV5150 or a 6505. The tones we get instead remind me more of like a hardcore punk sound, with maybe just a slight bit more edge. But something interesting happens as I listen to these World Painted Blood tracks more and more in preparations for these discussions. The guitar sound starts to make a little bit more sense, and I start to appreciate it a little more each time. I think this probably rests purely on the shoulders of the players involved and the construction of the riffs themselves rather than the actual amp sounds. To my ears, the rhythm guitar parts sound like they're being played quite hard, which only adds to the character and charm of the recorded guitar sound. It's as if some percentage of the grit in the riffs comes from the distortion created by absolutely mauling the strings. If this is actually the case or not, I'm not sure, because I don't think I've ever actually read anything about Kerry or Jeff's touch and if they skew towards playing with a harder or lighter touch. I will say, just going by observation from live videos and me standing directly in front of Jeff at my first Slayer gig, it appears that Kerry typically has the lighter touch and some degree of finesse, while Jeff is playing hard as shit because he's picking from his elbow like an absolute madman. But who knows? I'm probably wrong on both counts, but it sure makes for killer sounding riffs, and I'm here for it. Speaking of riffs, this song has lots of riffs throughout, and they are all killer. Not to beat a dead horse, at least in terms of the online fandom, but this song shines because it does precisely what Slayer songs should do, and what the band infamously strayed from in 1998, which is cram about half a dozen awesome riffs in a tight box. Now, have I mentioned how much I dig this song? It's incredible. As for the bass, it's big, but it's not intrusive in the mix. It's mostly doubling the guitar, as usual, but in doing so, it adds a nice general heft to the tone. As is often the case, most people probably would only notice if it were completely squashed in the mix and missing. But I gotta tell you, man, I can't wait to actually be able to talk about the bass again, but this isn't the track, unfortunately. So probably the first thing that stands out to me about the drums in Beauty Through Order is how natural they feel. Dave's meter is slightly consistent throughout, but that's exactly why the drumming feels and sounds human. Once you leave behind the click, or at least are not like a slave to the grid, the personality of the player comes through so much more. The intro and verse rhythm is super interesting to me because while the guitars are strumming relatively straightforward, Dave chose to use a simple beat with a really unconventional, almost swinging feel to it. And I'm not good with time signatures. In fact, I'm a complete moron. But I think that the riff switches between 9/8 and 5/8 time. This makes sense because it swings a little before the riff ends on a more kind of straight feeling last bar. And then it cycles back through again, of course. And while Lombardo keeps the eighth note straight on the crash, he is accenting on the snare in odd feeling places. It works because it provides like this lazy or lackadaisical overall drive for those parts of the song as they kind of build to the chorus. Now the chorus is a little different in as much as Dave doesn't use the hi-hat or ride, but instead relies on a heavily syncopated tom-tom kind of focus beat. Again, the time signature is returned to 4/4, but the guitar and crash accents occur in places that keep the feel kind of unsettled. The tension is ratcheted up during the chorus by these choices, but the band never pushes the chorus to that next level until that sort of kind of mini breakdown in the song. There's a quote out there somewhere from Dave around the time the record was released where he commented about this song in particular and how he was proud of how it builds to the strong natural crescendo, which I have to agree with him. You can feel the build as you're listening to the song, and the song is great because it feels as if it's going somewhere instead of just kind of treading water. Like an Atrocity Vendor, for example. Atrocity Vendor never really feels like it builds to anything. This one is moving. Its feet are going. Actually, now that I think about it, Lombardo only used the hi-hat during the breakdown or bridge, that little part. And even then, only during the bit where Tom is singing, "You Are My Sacrifice." So for only half of one bridge verse, I have no way of knowing for sure. I mean, I guess I will probably by the time that I finish this whole show. But I feel pretty certain that that's not only a first for Slayer, but remarkably rare for any metal band. We know that Dave was a much more improvisational player than Paul, but I would be interested to know whether this was an intentional thing or an ad-lib choice on his part. I know it's really kind of nerdy in the weeds stuff, but it's interesting nonetheless. And hey, guess what? You press play on this podcast, so you're along for the nerd ride with me. So as stated before, the song primarily deals with the subject of Countess Elizabeth Bathory. So what, if anything, is there to differentiate Jeff Hanneman and Tom Araya's take on the tale of the Countess from the seemingly countless songs about the same subject? Well, it's tough to say. The story has been told and retold in song form so many times and from so many different points of focus, I don't know that it's possible to craft a wholly original narrative. But what Hanneman does choose to lean into is the legend of Bathory killing the young women and girls of her area to collect their blood. Bathory would allegedly then bathe in this collected blood so that she may absorb the youthful beauty and vigor of these women and girls. And it's a fiendish tale if it's true. And for centuries, it was largely held to be just that, the horrible truth of the Countess. However, in more recent times, it has come to be more widely understood and accepted that while Elizabeth Bathory may well have been responsible for the deaths of some young women and girls, the severity and prolificness of her crimes was likely quite exaggerated as a means of political retribution. Either way, Hanneman and Araya latching on to the evil, excessive vanity of Bathory was a great creative angle. Add to that the fact that the lyrics shift from third-person perspective in the first half of the song to first-person perspective of the Countess in the second half. It adds an extra layer of creative flex that helps the subject avoid sounding tired and played out. Hanneman had a typically simple and to-the-point explanation for the song when they were doing press for this album, where he noted that the idea was in his head for some time, but he struggled a bit with the framing of the narrative from a woman's point of view, because obviously he's not a woman. Instead, he shifted the narrative emphasis to the fact that Bathory was a power-hungry, ruthless killer, and thereby removed the gender perspective, which made it more just kind of a universal evil perspective. Obviously, the Slayer guys are well experienced, very well experienced, with writing from that general evil or dark view of the world. And I think it was a smart workaround on Jeff's part, and it made for an interesting, if simple, lyric. So Tom's vocal performance of the song is pretty good exercise of his range. I think it subtly plays with the shifting narrative perspective as the song builds to its climax. Early in the song, as the lyric leans kind of on that third-person view, Tom maintains a lower intensity level that slightly increases as he shouts through the chorus. However, by the time the song reaches the "God did not do this" bridge bit, and especially in the Birthright lyrics where the song is fully in first-person perspective, Tom has ratcheted up the intensity and menace considerably and ends with his more aggressive kind of post-God Hates Us All vocal aggression. which is, again, to underscore the point, is really cool because it brings, not only does it build the tension along with the song, as I was saying, with the drums and the guitar parts, but also like the psychology of the character that they're describing and they're inhabiting during the song. And we shift to the first person perspective through Bathory's eyes, the intensity and kind of unhingedness is really coming through in Tom's vocal performance. Just the frantic, view on actions that Bathory must have been experiencing whenever she was really kind of in berserker mode towards the end before she was caught. And while I don't really consider Tom to be the MVP on this particular song, I do think it is absolutely one of his MVP performances of the 2000s era of the band. Okay, Beauty Through Order is our second reviewed song from World Painted Blood, and in my mind, undoubtedly the stronger of the two. But for now, we must wave see you later to World Painted Blood, because we will not be exploring this record again for a long, long time, until we work our way all the way to Hate Worldwide. And damn, that's a long way off. Probably further than you think. Knowing that, let's send this record off in style. And by style, I mean placing Beauty Through Order at the number 4 spot in our overall catalog ranking, just ahead of the Antichrist and a little bit behind Altar of Sacrifice. Sometimes I even surprise myself. It's a surprisingly excellent late era song, and despite being about a relatively cliched subject, manages to offer an interesting take coupled with really strong songwriting and pretty solid performances. I highly, highly, highly recommend this track. So on the next episode, hooray, we're finally getting a taste of 1988's South of Heaven with the Jeff Hanneman penned Behind the Crooked Cross. Just a heads up, South of Heaven has been my favorite Slayer record for over 20 years now. Will I be able to rate this one objectively and disregard my own personal bias? Doubtful, but I give you my word that I'm going to try. Tune in to hear if I can actually pull it off. Probably not. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're hearing this. If you want to drop a line to the show directly to give me a pat on the back for my efforts, correct me, or tell me why it's outright blasphemy that any song written after 1990 is in the top 5 tracks so far, I'm always happy to read your messages at slaytozpod at gmail.com. slaytozpod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and as always, remember.